going from one great interview to another. A good friend of this show, the man himself, Dimitri Lascaris. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dimitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party in Canada. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm just fine. Thank you very much, Jamal. How are you doing?
I am doing well, man. Thank you for joining me. He also runs Reason to Resist, the YouTube channel. I should have put that in, but I remember it off the top of my head. I had the opportunity to look through the channel the other day. You do fantastic work. Yeah, you kick ass. You really do. And even when you come on the show, you're kicking ass. So the audience gets just a droplet of Dimitri here. You get to have a more full-throated version of him on his channel. So definitely check his channel out.
Well, you're
Dimitri,
kicking ass as much as anybody, Jamal. I have to say you're doing great stuff. You really are. And I say that to everybody that I mention your program to. You're really doing great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try. This is all I do. This is my life at this point. So hopefully I'm doing it well. So Iran has scored a big spy op. Now, usually we hear Mossad is everywhere. Mossad is, the 25-eye monster that is just everywhere doing everything. Has files on everybody, can kill anybody in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very rare occasion where Iran has come out saying, we have this massive intelligence operation. We were able to get our hands on all sorts of sensitive data from Israel, and we will release that data very soon. But they have been putting out tidbits of information. And some of the tidbits are fascinating. For one, they're outed, quote unquote, everybody knew Israel has nukes, right? So this notion that they outed it is a little funny. But they were effectively saying, look, we know where the sites are. We know the relationships that have been taking place between Western governments and Israel in relation to their nuclear program. And something else they said that is explosive, and they are going to have to prove, by the way, they have to prove all of this, meaning they're going to have to release this information. It can't just be take our word for it. But they're saying, and I actually believe it, that the IAEA was working in tandem with Israel and that it gave them names of Iranian scientists, with those Iranian scientists being assassinated by Israel. That is explosive. Now, this goes to the ICC, where the ICC is supposed to be independent. And of course, they told, I forget the gentleman's name, the barrister, hey, you're supposed to go after African dictators, not after countries that we like Israel. Cut it out. And now it seems you get the Atomic Energy Agent, that's not Atomic Energy Agency, the agency that was looking over Syria, that obviously was being maneuvered, where the actual inspectors who were on the ground, they effectively got rid of those people, rewrote the report to make it look like Syria had chemical weapons. And now you get this, where it seems that the IAEA, something that's supposed to be an independent organization, is not independent in the least, and is working hand in hand with enemies of this country to undermine this country by having its people killed. That is explosive. Give me your take on that. I mean, that's mind-blowing.
Well, let me start by saying a few things about the leaks generally. This followed months of reports out of Israel that they were arresting Israelis who they alleged were part of a spy ring for Iran. And given that happened, that preceded these leaks of information, I suspect that what has happened here is that it came to a point where all of these arrests had convinced the Iranians that their spy network in Israel was compromised. Perhaps it had been completely dismantled as a result of these arrests. And so they finally said, well, there's no point in our concealing this information anymore because the flow of information has been cut off. And so they went public with the fact that they had engaged in effective espionage for probably some years. So I'm just saying that I think all of these arrests in Israel, immediately preceding this announcement, lends credibility.
Yeah. And by the way, the IAEA has also said that these are legit, that basically Iran has something, that they got their hands on some information. So even the IAEA acknowledges they got something. Whatever we don't know exactly what it is, but they got something. And Iran has been crowing for the last several days about it. I want them to release it. They're like, we're going to release it to our friends. We're going to release it to the public, certain parts of the data. It seems like they're sifting through a lot of data in order to decide what they're going to release versus what they're going to keep for themselves. But
Right.
if that is demonstrated that the IAEA was effectively working hand in hand, and they also point out that, the relationship between, let's say, Netanyahu and some other governments in the West that lecture Iran about their nuclear program, when instead they know that this program is peaceful, but they use that Israel is like paying people off. They talk about Israel paying governments off for the Abraham Accords. I mean, it is a lot of data that they are saying that they have access to from these leaks. And Israel has been very quiet. Have you noticed that?
Hmm. Absolutely. But the thing is, Jamal, that, because the Israelis know they have information, they clearly believe that Iran has information. Otherwise, why would they be arresting all these people?
Right.
And the scope of the information seems vast. We shouldn't assume that everything that Iran says is true. What some of the claims they're making might themselves be kind of, information operations to put the leadership of Israel into a state of extreme uncertainty about what they do not have, right? So, but having said that, this allegation against Grossi, first of all, it is shocking, but at the same time, when you look at Grossi's history, and what I'm thinking of particularly is how the IAEA conducted itself in regard to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, which has been under the control of Russian troops for, I think, for almost the entire period of the special military operation, more than 3 years. It was repeatedly attacked by the Ukrainians. This idea that was circulating in the corporate media in the West that Russia was, bombing
its own, right? Which makes no sense, right? You have Russian troops stationed at the plant, and they're like, Russia's just bombing its own nuclear power plant.
And if Grossi is, the leader of an organization charged with nuclear security, if that's what he should have denounced this in absolutely unambiguous terms. This was an insanely dangerous thing, which it was clear the Ukrainians were doing. And I didn't see a peep come out of this man, not a peep of condemnation of what Ukraine was doing. So, but this is a different, keeping your mouth shut in this politically explosive situation is one thing, but helping Israel to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists, it seems to me, is even worse, even more egregious. And the problem here is that even if it isn't exactly true, but the Iranians believe it is true, I don't know how Iran can continue to cooperate with the IAEA. If it is led by somebody they believe to be that compromised, and if it is true, it has implications not just for Iran's dealings with the IAEA. It has implications for the entire world. This organization is corrupt to the core. If it is capable of whatever one may think of Iran's government, right? Whatever one may think of its nuclear program, if it is capable of providing highly sensitive information to a genocidal apartheid state that has repeatedly engaged in the most aggressive and provocative behavior, including the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, which are war crimes. These are war crimes. Okay. Then how can anybody trust this organization? The organization at that point is so compromised that it either needs to replace its entire leadership, starting at the very top, or we need to come up with some other regulatory structure for the nuclear industry in the world today. But this is a serious, serious blow. If there's any truth to this, it is a devastating, fatal blow to the credibility of the IAEA. And that is something that should be of great concern to us all because of the role it plays in nuclear security.
Well, there's also another problem with this. Israel has nukes. And so the idea that you are, again, I know we have to keep prefacing this by if this is true, because you're right. Some of this stuff could be information operations. Like the stuff about Netanyahu, that would be a little bit weird to be in a database, right? But I guess my point is, this could be true. And it sounds true to me. Like I know how the ICC works, right? Where they would go after an African dictator. They would go after the guy from the Philippines. And yet you have the US invading a country, Afghanistan being party to the Rome Statute. And it takes forever for them to do anything. Look how long it took them to move on Israel. Israel had been killing people for over a year. And it looked like it took everything in them to make the decision to move in this way, meaning these bodies seem to be compromised in general, especially depending upon who's leading the body. For God's sake, they put Annalena Baerbock as head of the United Nations. that lunatic, that pretty lunatic, and I'll say that pretty lunatic because I think she's gorgeous. But I guess my point is these organizations seem to be compromised with Western leaders in these organizations that don't seem to be able to transcend where they come from in order to allow the organization to function as an independent entity and instead settle political scores. And I don't know what entity needs to be created to avoid that process. From your point of view as a lawyer, if Iran, like right now, for example, the IAEA is saying that Iran is doing nuclear tests that breaches the Non-Proliferation Act. Okay, but if Iran is right and it's compromised, then how can you trust what the IAEA is coming out with in regards to the tests?
Absolutely. It has zero credibility, no credibility. I think the IAEA is, for reasons I've articulated and others which I haven't mentioned, that its credibility was severely degraded long ago. But this is a death blow. This is a death blow to its credibility.
Step into that. What was the long ago items?
Well, I think I haven't seen a peep coming out of the IAEA over decades that Israel, technically speaking, it's the only state in West Asia that is not a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Right. So that places constraints on what the IAEA can do with respect to Israel, but it certainly could have played an advocacy role all these years and said, this is extremely dangerous. It is extremely dangerous that a state that conducts itself in this way has enough nukes to provoke a nuclear winter and potentially kill billions of human beings. So you, the international community, need to be doing something about the fact that Israel has a nuclear arsenal. Instead, what Western governments were doing was they were pretending it doesn't exist. They refused even to talk about it. The height of irresponsibility given Israel's behavior. So to my mind, the mere fact that the IAEA leadership all these decades was completely silent on this extraordinary danger that Israel's nuclear arsenal poses to humanity was itself a real dark stain on its credibility as a nuclear regulator for the protection of the global community. But then this thing, as I mentioned, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, was a further blow. And this, I mean, it's all over. And for in terms of the legitimacy of this organization, if it's true. Now, when it comes to what you said about Annalena Baerbock, this frothing at the mouth, dangerous neocon. The United States is effectively the U.S. government. It's really a stunning accomplishment of sort of, its hegemonic agenda. It has effectively co-opted every major international organization. You look at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is based in Washington. It is entirely a tool of U.S. imperialism, right? And has been inflicting upon peoples of the global South for decades at the behest of the U.S. government, vicious programs of austerity, and has indebted them and enslaved them effectively, made them, debt serfs. This was all done at the behest of the U.S. government. In the United Nations, you mentioned the president of the UN General Assembly, Baerbock. What about Antonio Guterres, who I believe was, prime minister of Portugal? Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the human rights situation in occupied Palestine, put out a tweet yesterday or the day before in which she was, castigating Antonio Guterres for doing nothing about the expulsion of Israel from the United Nations.
Right.
He's just sitting there on his hands. Well, the UN Security Council won't act because we all know that, the United States would veto any initiative to expel Israel. That doesn't mean he shouldn't have been out there advocating for it. He should have been advocating for it. What does it take for somebody to merit expulsion from the United Nations? Hasn't Israel crossed that line a long time ago? If that doesn't merit expulsion from the United Nations, I don't know. So at least he should have been out there using his bully pulpit.
Would the U.S. been able to veto that? I mean, can one nation veto every other nation around the globe? I mean, it would have been the U.S. and Israel and some rando state, tiny country that's trying to gain favor with the U.S. versus the entirety of the world saying expel them. Does 3 states, what is the number that's necessary to expel a state from the United Nations?
Well, as I understand, and I could be wrong about this, Jamal, I remember looking into this some months ago, but my understanding is it's not sufficient for the UN General Assembly to support the expulsion of a state from the UN. I think this has to be, I could be mistaken about this, but my understanding has been that the UN Security Council has to bless that decision. And that
Are you serious?
I believe that's the case. And certainly that's what's suggested by Francesca Albanese's tweet. She said, "Don't wait for the UN Security Council to act." But in any event, it doesn't. Whatever the formal mechanisms may be whereby this can be accomplished. And by the way, let's just point out that even if we ignore the veto that the UN Security Council, the veto power of the permanent members, even if this was something that the UN General Assembly could do without the imprimatur of the UN Security Council, the UN General Assembly is to a large extent co-opted by the United States. You know, it's full of these tiny little states like Micronesia and Nauru and the Marshall Islands, were all effectively, just arms of the U.S. government's foreign policy. That's all they are, and they have a tiny little population, and their vote counts for as much as that of China or India, or the Russian Federation, which is preposterous. There should be some system of weighted voting. So what the U.S. has done within the General Assembly, first of all, is it completely dominates these tiny island states that have a vote equivalent to that of the larger non-Western states. And secondly, on any vote that is of extreme importance to the United States, undoubtedly a vote to expel Israel would be, it uses its economic power to cajole and pressure and intimidate states that aren't necessarily vassals of the U.S., but nonetheless are very vulnerable to U.S. Retaliation. It cajoles them into not supporting initiatives in the General Assembly that they would otherwise be supporting. This has happened again and again and again. I think this happened, for example, in the case of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, what we call in the West the invasion. The General Assembly, a lot of its members, I think, ended up condemning Russia's invasion, not necessarily because they wanted to take a side. Their inclination probably was, let's just stay out of this. There's legitimate complaints on the Russian side. We don't want to get involved. But the U.S. pressured them and threatened them behind the scenes. And you've seen reports about this for decades.
Yes.
How the U.S. plays this nasty, nefarious game. So even the UN General Assembly, to a significant degree, has been co-opted by the United States. And so these institutions, as a result of all of this, as I think you've indicated quite rightly, their legitimacy is so compromised at this stage that I think we basically need a new international legal architecture.
Yeah, I just don't know what that looks like and how that even worked, like how to even get to that front. I mean, because the UN Security Council makes anything impossible. I mean, short of an alien invasion, I don't know what the agreement will be upon what it could act. This was Israel being asked. This was an Israeli official, I believe this was a couple of days ago. And he's being asked about nukes. Listen to what he says. This is a fantastic question.
Why should the world tolerate you having nuclear weapons and not, say, Iran?
First, again, we never admitted to have such weapons. But the very comparison is, I must say, it's very insulting, and I tell you why. We suffered one Holocaust. We listened to our neighbors.
Is it because of the Holocaust that you should be allowed to have nuclear weapons?
You know what? This interview was finished now.
He said, it is very insulting that you're asking me why we should have nukes. And they always said this, right? Blood libel that you're asking me this question. And then the guy says, is it because of the Holocaust? Something that you just said, right? He was like, well, we suffered a Holocaust. Yeah. Is it because of the Holocaust? That's why you have nukes? This interview is over. I'm done with this interview.
Yeah.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, I think the second question proved to the Israeli that this man was serious about going down that path, and he said, "I better bail out of here before the questions get really tough." So, anyway.
Oh, that clip is hilarious. He said, "I never said we never said we had nukes." He says that we suffered a Holocaust. I love the fact that you're like, 50 years ago we suffered a Holocaust. Oh, so is it the Holocaust? I'm out of this. We're done with this question. We're done with this. I love that. I love the fact that we're asking that finally. I love the fact that finally someone acknowledges, yes, you do have nukes. Everybody knows it's the worst kept secret in the world that you guys have nukes. And the question becomes, what do you do with it if you acknowledge it? I know the U.S. law kicks in if they acknowledge it. If Iran puts the stuff and the information out, it goes to the UN, it's aired before the world. Can they still just not acknowledge that they have nukes? Does it work that way? I don't know the law around this.
Well, I guess they're not under strictly speaking a legal obligation to acknowledge that they have nukes. They're not a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Right.
So the fact that they developed an arsenal, no one can argue, and I certainly wouldn't, that they violated the treaty because they're not a member of the treaty.
Yeah, the sovereign state.
But
Right.
that doesn't mean that's not an existential threat to humanity. It is an existential threat to humanity that these bloodthirsty lunatics have a nuclear arsenal. And in that response, he again, the Israeli government does this every day, every minute of every day. He's conflating the Jewish people with the Zionist colony. Okay, it was the Jewish people that were subjected to these horrors at the hands of Europeans, not Palestinians or other Arabs, at the hands of Europeans, white Europeans, not the Zionist entity. It didn't even exist at that point in time. So, and if you look at the Jewish population living in the West today, although there have been a couple of incidents recently, including the killing of the 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, there have been some isolated incidents during this genocide, in particular, of violence against persons who are Jewish, but who are perceived, I think, rightly to be pro-Israel or working for Israel. Nonetheless, the overall status of the Jewish people living in the Western states has been quite secure for quite some time.
Yeah.
There are millions and millions of Jewish persons living in Western countries in security, and they don't need a nuclear arsenal. And many of them, in fact, are living in countries that have nukes, like the United States, Britain, and France. So there's no need for Israel to have nukes in order to provide security to the Jewish people. That's just a flagrant lie.
It is terrifying to me that they have nukes, especially considering they're so belligerent. And the New York Times, again, I'm very skeptical of this peace process. I don't know what is in Trump's mind, but whatever is in Trump's mind is different from what is in the mind of people who are around him, who are far more savvy in regards to what their political objectives are. And so Trump is like, there's this impasse on this notion of enrichment, where Iran is like, dude, we're a sovereign state. Who the F are you to tell us that we can or cannot enrich? Israel has nukes. Go talk to them, right? And Trump is like, well, they can't have enrichment. They can't have enrichment. He said it recently. And so they're at loggerheads. Now, Trump, at some point, is going to have to come to a decision on whether or not, are we going to bomb Iran? Are we going to let Israel bomb Iran? Now, he has told Netanyahu, will you please stop saying you're going to bomb Iran in the media? Like, will you stop saying that, according to the New York Times? And that Trump seems to be still pushing under this notion of negotiations, under some mythical belief that he can get them to give up what they consider to be a sovereign right, and not just consider to be is a sovereign right, which is, from my point of view, they should have already created a nuke. If it was me, I would have already done it. That's the only way North Korea is remaining safe. That's the only way states remain safe, especially considering the rapaciousness of Israel that has shown no compunction of murdering large scores of people, and Iran will be under that boot also if given any chance of Israel succeeding in this. So the fact that the question is lingering in the air on what does the U.S. do? And the Iranian military has just come out and say, we will decimate America's bases if you attack us. He said it flat out. We will kill Americans if you have military strikes against us. That's assuming that America is involved. From Israel's point of view, America would get involved in order to help Israel, even if Trump says he's not. And because of those nukes, can Israel blackmail the U.S. into getting involved? Hey, if you don't help us, we're going to go nuclear. What does the U.S. do under that model? Like, I don't think people realize how dangerous a country like this having nukes is.
Yeah, if they double, I think you and I have had this discussion before. I have no doubt that Israel would nuke Iran if Iran, they'd think about it seriously. I don't know whether they'd actually do it, but would they give it serious consideration, and are they capable of it? If Iran delivers one or more devastating blows with its conventional missiles to Israel, absolutely. That should be, any rational person should be operating on the assumption, given Israel's behavior, that it's capable of doing it.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what the Iranians are concerned about. And that's why they have shown so much, one of the reasons why they've shown so much restraint in the face of decades of Israeli provocations and criminality directed at Iran and its people. But let me just say something about this prospect of war with Iran, Jamal.
Please.
Whenever I see a report in the media, particularly the Western corporate media, about the U.S. government pressuring Israel to do anything, I just
laugh.
It's just noise to me. It could be true, but it's probably just bullshit. So because the U.S. government has all Western governments have a public relations motivation to distance themselves from the aggression and the crimes of Israel. They want to be able to say, hey, man, we tried to stop them. We tried to reason with these people, but they live in a tough neighborhood. They're surrounded by these evil, Jew haters, and they want to destroy Israel. And so even though we didn't want them to do it, and even though we wish they hadn't done it, now that they've done it, we have to protect them. We have no choice but to involve ourselves. There's this whole shtick that's been going on for decades. And I think that the more likely interpretation of what is going on is that the Trump administration, partly because it's under so much pressure from psychopaths like Lindsey Graham in the Senate to go to war with Iran, it probably is inclined to go to war with Iran. It may not be particularly excited about the prospect, but it is keenly aware of the fact that the public, and a poll just came out which showed this, most Americans want nothing to do with war with Iran. And there's going to be a political price to pay if the U.S. gets into a full-blown war with Iran, a huge price to pay. And Trump is positioning himself to say, we tried to stop it. We tried to negotiate with the Iranians. They were unreasonable. We tried to tell the Israelis don't attack them. The Israelis, because they felt so threatened by this evil monster, had to do it. Now we have no choice, American people. This is what I think is coming, and I hope very much that I'm wrong. But I think that's plausible.
I agree with everything you just said, because otherwise, why come out with it? There are some people who are Donald Trump apologists, and they aggravate the hell out of me, even though there's some of them come on the show. I love the fact that they come on the show. I love them to death. But that I hate that they're apologists for the Trump administration. Trump didn't know anything about the strikes on Russia. He had no idea that was going to happen. Nobody told him that this was taking place. And it's like, are you serious right now? And the same thing with this. Why, if you're trying to get a deal, if I'm trying to get a deal with you on something, let's say I'm trying to, you're selling your car. I'm trying to buy your car. And I said, Dimitri, I'm in the business for a car. I really want a car. I need you to sell me that car. I'm going to break your knees. And you're like, dude, I'm selling the car. Why do you need to break my knees? I'm just saying, you're a very nice person, but I'm going to break your knees if you don't sell me the car. And I'll give you $2 for your car. And it's like, okay, dude, come on. Right? Like, meaning I'm asking for something that I know you're not going to give. And I continuously ask for the same thing over and over and over again. And I don't know what is in Trump's mind. I am aware of what is in the mind of the sociopaths that are around Trump. There is an article that came out by Politico pointing out that MAGA, who some of them may be true believers, don't want war, whereas the neocons and the lunatics that Donald Trump has effectively surrounded himself with have lumped together and started pressuring Trump in a lobbying campaign to try to get him to effectively bomb Iran and to not take it off the table. Whereas I guess others in MAGA are like, dude, you said you were trying to end wars, not start wars. What the hell are you doing? With Trump, Fenton City. Now, the most interesting thing in the world to me is what is in Trump's mind. Oh, that is so interesting to me. Because I agree with everything that you just said, that there is a continuity of all these presidents. Iran is the last man standing. Donald Trump is surrounded by neocons and whack jobs. And they obviously want the U.S. to fight a war on behalf of Israel, even if it takes Israel to start it, where they can say, well, we did everything we could. We tried to negotiate. They wouldn't allow us to negotiate. But they have policy papers, which Path to Persia, that points out exactly what we're seeing them do right now. But just because they're policy papers, everybody knows that Donald Trump doesn't read. So Donald Trump may not know those policy papers exist. And so in his mind is the thing of what matters. Does the president know and is on board for these plans to attack Iran, or is the president being maneuvered because he doesn't know anything about the world and he's being told, sir, we're going to get them to accept the deal. We're going to get them to accept the deal. And Trump believes this is a good deal. We're going to get them to accept it. They're going to accept it. And then it's going to be shocked as all hell when in 2 or 3 weeks, he's still banging his head on the pavement when Iran is like, no. And now he has boxed himself into a position of, I have to attack him, or I have to not accept what I said I was never, I have to accept what I never said I was going to accept. Mm-hmm. That is very possible to be true. Mm-hmm. What do you think on this? Like, and I know it is impossible for you to get into Trump's mind on this, But I can't believe that the president will be left holding the bag for what this is going to turn out to be, which is an utter and complete catastrophe.
Yeah.
It would destroy his administration.
You remind me of this horror movie that Jennifer Lopez once starred in, where she was like this psychiatrist and found a method of getting into the mind of a psychopath, and it was she was on.
Cell. Was it called Cell?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
Yeah.
And this horrifying journey through the mind of a psychopath. Frankly, I don't know that I want to get inside of Donald Trump's head, but
on that question, Lord knows I do, because it would solve so much for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't.
I agree with you. I'm joking, of course. I agree. I totally agree with you. So look, but at the end of the day, we can't, and so we have to go on the basis of the external evidence. It's all we can do. The man, you said he's surrounded by neocon whack jobs. Of course, I agree with you, but I would say that the reason why he's in the position is because he himself is also a neocon whack job.
Yeah.
And that's what his record tells us. That's exactly what it tells us. He ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the top general of Iran, in a foreign country with which the U.S. is supposed to be allied now, Iraq, but which in fact occupies and largely destroyed, and took out not only other Iranians, but representatives of the Iraqi government. He did that, okay? He pulled the United States out of the Obama-era nuclear deal, even though Iran was complying with the deal, and even though the nuclear enrichment threshold under that deal, 3.67%, is extremely low. It's technically speaking, as I understand it, it's a bit below the level of enrichment you need just to operate a peaceful civilian nuclear reactor, which is 5%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so even the IAEA recognized that Iran was complying with that deal. He pulled them out. He is the one who has repeatedly said something that he knows Iran will not accept. He's demanded it, which is no enrichment.
Yep.
Iran does have a right, as do all states, to peaceful enrichment of uranium. The enrichment of uranium for peaceful civilian purposes. So they're correct. They're totally correct to say as a sovereign nation, we have that right. Nothing under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty takes it away from us. And by the way, why the hell should we give that right up when you yourselves have nukes and the Israelis have nukes and you're enriching, your heart's content? So he knows all of this, and yet he keeps demanding that Iran, end all enrichment. And I could go on and on. There's the attacks, the devastating attacks on
Yemen.
Groups who are allied with Iran, the criminal attacks on the Yemenis, on Lebanon, on Syria, all with the assistance and sometimes the direct participation of the United States government. This happened under Trump. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
He was the first one who directly attacked in his first administration, directly attacked Syrian government forces. He's the one who occupied Syria, an ally of Iran, and was stealing their oil and occupying their precious agricultural land. I could go on and on, Jamarl.
He defended Idlib.
Yes, exactly. He's a neocon whack job. That's what his record tells us. And the rational assumption is that man is going to finish off the last state standing in that state of seven, that collection of 7 states that, the neocons back in the 90s, early 2000s said they wanted to destroy. And by the way, and I think this is very, very important to understand, I don't think that really this is about Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. intelligence.
It's not. Oh, come on. It's not. It has nothing to do with it any more than it was with Iraq. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. What this is about is they can't abide the fact that there is this large, influential state in West Asia refusing to be a vassal of the United States, and so they've decided they're going to destroy it, just like they destroyed Libya, just like they destroyed Syria, just like they're in the process of destroying Lebanon and largely destroyed Yemen, and Sudan. This is what they do. If they can't control a state in a region that they want to dominate, they just render it a complete failed state, a chaotic jungle of suffering for the indigenous peoples. And I think that's what their goal is with respect to Iran. They realize they can't overthrow its government. They can't replace it with a vassal. So they're just going to make it into a failed state. That's their goal. So they're not going to try to penetrate, a half a mile down into the mountain. And by the way, if they accomplish that, that would be extraordinarily dangerous from an environmental perspective, something that the West doesn't talk about. But I don't think they believe they can accomplish that. This is just about making Iran into a failed state.
The only thing I would quibble with what you said is I think the U.S. is going to run into a buzzsaw.
Oh yeah.
I think I think they're going to run into a buzzsaw. I think Israel is going to run into a buzzsaw. I don't think, if you read like the New York Times, the stuff that they say is out of whack with reality. They were like, well, Israel was able to entirely destroy Iran's air defense. Really? They were? Really? And it's like, why do you think that? Like, what gives you what gives you that assessment that that's what took place? I watched those videos. You can see Israel's weapons getting knocked out the sky. And so it's like they run with these false assessments. Russia is Nigeria with snow. They're just a gas station masquerading as a country. Certainly we can knock them over. Okay, fast forward 3-4 years later, and what's happened? The entire context of the world has changed. If we remember, Iran was isolated. It is no longer isolated. Russia's made agreements and friends all around the world, and it has beat the living hell out of all of NATO with weapons productions, outstripping NATO 3-1. They got it wrong. And I'm saying, even with the trade war, they got it wrong. They weren't able to pacify the world with that trade war. Trump was begging other nations to help it gang up on China because the U.S. couldn't do it on its own. And I think the same thing and something similar is going to happen with Iran, where they think to themselves, the capabilities of Iran, I don't think they are fully capable of assessing in honest terms. I think they're assessing it in ideological terms. This is not an isolated nation anymore. They're not this country that doesn't have defenses. I think they could potentially destroy all of these American bases. They can knock out boats out of the ground. I don't even think we fully understand the capability of how far those missiles can fly. I could be wrong on this.
Oh, Jamal, I agree with all that. Like you and I are on the same page here, man. I do not at all think they're going to be able to pull this off. If they could pull it off, we should all be, hotly opposed to it. What right do they have to destroy a country like Iran? They have zero right. That's a criminal thing to do. To destroy any country is a criminal thing to do. But I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. And the region will go up in flames. And this will be potentially the death blow to Western hegemony in that part of the world.
Honestly, this sounds horrible, but part of me, I'm not going to say it. It's just
I know, by the way, what you're going to say, and I'm not going to say it either.
Part of me is like, I want them to blow that shit out the sky. I want them to destroy. Like, I've gotten far harder in the way that I've seen this stuff, and it's like I feel like there needs to be consequences, and I don't know who else meets out those consequences, short of you bit off more than you could chew. What NATO and what Ukraine is experiencing now, just perdition. You kept poking that bear. You didn't believe the stove was hot. And now you're realizing, oh my God, the stove is hot. And the US, who said we'll be with you for as long as it takes, is now like, we're calling this a day for the time being. We're not gonna give any more support. You can buy weapons from, meaning, yeah.
Listen, there are a lot of people out there in this world today, including in the West, who are feeling what you and I are feeling, which is we hate war. We don't want war.
No.
But man, the only way we're going to bring this horror show to an end is for Israel and the United States to be dealt a devastating military defeat in West Asia by the resistance in West Asia. There's no indication that, the U.S. and other Western governments are going to use their economic and political power to stop the genocide. Right. And, there's nothing wrong with having this feeling like if that's what it takes to stop the genocide, we don't want it to happen, but what alternative is there?
It just feels crappy. It just feels crappy. Because it's effectively saying another country being attacked and responding with overwhelming retaliation to that. It just feels crappy. Colonel Wilkerson pointed out, he says the U.S. will be militarily defeated if we attack Iran. Even Douglas McGregor points this out. We will be militarily defeated. He said this is not the military from the 1980s. These guys are running around with an ideological point of view that is nowhere near based on reality. And they are going to run into a buzzsaw if they indeed try to make that strike. Because it's not like, what are they going to do? Put 1 million troops on the ground? Where? Where are your airfields going to be? Like, all of these things are logistical issues. And so you're just talking about airstrikes, air power. Okay. Okay, we'll see, right? Mm-hmm. I agree with everything you said. I think that's what they're gearing up for. And I think all of this other stuff is just public relations, where the U.S. can distance itself from what Israel does, but will come to its aid when it needs aid. Hell, it may even say, well, Israel blackmailed us, so we had to get involved. Who knows? Dimitri, man, I always enjoy these conversations. You are fantastic. Let me give the audience a heads up of where you are, if I can find it. There we are. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dimitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. He runs the show Reason to Resist. Check him out on YouTube. He has a fantastic show. Today is just a portion of how awesome he is. Dimitri, we have over 3,500 people today.
That's great. It's a pleasure to
3,500
speak to your
people.
audience, and I wish everybody well. Thank you.
Well, I'm only telling you that not as a boast. I'm saying it because they're there for you. Like, meaning this, I don't get 3,500 on every day. They came, they stayed, they listened. It was like, hey, we like what's being heard. I guess my point is check Dimitri out. He's awesome. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Peace out. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we have a damn good crowd today. Shout out to